infectious diseases, research, medicine, health. Welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. And now, broadcasting from the Outbreak News Skylar Studios in beautiful West Central Florida, here is your host, microbiologist and editor of OutbreakNewsToday.com, Robert Harriman.
Well, hey everybody, this is Robert, and welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. Now, a recent Reuters article on the problem with Venezuela's measles outbreak crossing the Brazilian border said the following. Brazil complained on Thursday that Venezuela was doing nothing to stop the spread of an outbreak of measles in the country and other neighboring countries that has been sparked by an exodus of Venezuelans fleeing economic collapse. This has prompted Brazil to launch a nationwide campaign to vaccinate 11 million children and adults who request it. Now, my guest today commented on Twitter writing, "Totalitarian governments, not surprisingly, spawn infectious disease outbreaks that place other countries at risk." Well, joining me now is Amesh Adalja, MD. Dr. Adalja is a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and a recognized expert in infectious diseases. Dr. Adalja, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Let me just quickly remind the audience about a few things that have happened in Venezuela with as far as infectious diseases recently. Malaria cases have gone up by a factor of 10 since 2010. Diphtheria, a vaccine-preventable disease, which was basically wiped out of Venezuela decades ago, is back with a vengeance with about 2,000 suspected cases and 164 deaths. And of course, there's measles, the problem we're discussing in this article from Reuters. And since mid-2017, well over 2,000 cases have been confirmed. And this disease was eradicated in 2014. So, Dr. Adalja, let me go ahead and start with elaborating on your comment on Twitter. And I think I know your answer, but let's give it a shot. Specifically, what is there about totalitarian regimes that causes the infectious disease outbreaks, and how do they become threats to their neighbors?
Well, when you have a totalitarian regime and you have the breakdown of the recognition of individual rights, you start to see basically a country in turmoil where many things that people take for granted in a civilized nation go away, and that includes access to products like vaccines, for example. And the other point is that when you have these kind of command economies and food shortages start to happen, which has been the case, I've read reports of all the animals in the zoo in Venezuela have been eaten, because there's no food. You've got malnutrition, lack of access, lack of infrastructure, a terrorized population that really makes it, that's going to be fleeing across borders. That really is a powder keg for an infectious disease emergency to occur. And when those people flee the government, understandably, they're fleeing across the border, they put other countries at risk because those diseases come with them. And so this really is completely a result of the fact that you've had a breakdown of civilization and basically a return to a primitive situation in Venezuela.
Right. And it's not only Brazil that's feeling the brunt of this. Colombia is also, and probably other countries around Venezuela. Dr. Adalja, can you point to some other countries or areas of the world where we've seen this occur, past or present?
Anytime you have a dictatorship or that type of a government, you've seen this historically. So it's just a couple that come to mind right away. We've seen in the former Soviet Union, you had multi-drug resistant tuberculosis outbreaks. We've seen in China an HIV outbreak that was related to tainted blood products that was really covered up and allowed to fester for a long time. We saw the SARS outbreak in China, which was covered up and suppressed and allowed to spread. We have seen historic, and you look at countries in Africa where you have African dictatorships where there is very rampant HIV rates and outbreaks of diseases that occur related to HIV. We've seen, I think it's countless things that you've seen. Any time that you see this kind of breakdown in law and order and infrastructure, you have to remember that I think of a rights-respecting government as part of civilization, as well as the control of infectious disease as part of a civilization. So they kind of correlate with each other. Diseases went away after the Industrial Revolution, after people started to have rights-respecting governments and less despotic governments. And when you see that recede, infectious diseases come roaring back because they're part of it. They're a civilizing effect, and I don't think you could consider a totalitarian or dictatorship-style government to be civilizing.
Right. Now, so I would guess that you would say, and I think the evidence is pretty clear, that countries that have a rule of law and some semblance of a free market economy are way less likely to experience what we're seeing in Venezuela.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you have that type of a government, a rights-respecting, free enterprise type of government, you have access to products, you have access to nutrition, you have access to doctors. You don't have a brain drain where all your best minds are leaving, so there are people there that can offer solutions to infectious disease outbreaks when they happen. There are myriad examples of how a free economy and an individual rights-respecting government fosters health, and you've seen, just look at the lifespans of a country like the United States compared to a country like what you'll see in Venezuela. What you're probably going to see a lifespan decrease, and you see that historically as freedom kind of goes through the world, you've seen lifespans increase and infectious diseases fall. It's a correlation that really has a strong causative association, because there definitely is a benefit to having access to these products, and innovation. All that kind of stuff cannot happen in terms of basic healthcare system delivery in those type of totalitarian dictatorships where people don't even have food, let alone vaccines.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for Venezuela, I don't see that changing anytime soon. Maduro definitely has an iron fist over there. Any final thoughts on this particular topic?
This shouldn't be surprising to anybody that this is happening.
Right.
And just to take people to another context, you remember that there was a North Korean soldier that defected into South Korea several months ago. And when they examined that man, and this is a soldier in the North Korean military who presumably has access to food and the best healthcare, he had parasites and other infectious diseases that evidence of them, because that's what happens in these countries. They're basically, like I said, powder kegs or tinderboxes for the spread of infectious diseases. So part of controlling infectious diseases is going to be getting governments to recognize individual rights.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's very unfortunate for the people of Venezuela and the surrounding countries now. And I want to thank you, Dr. Amesh Adalja, for your time and your thoughts. I appreciate it.
Thanks.